All right, so we'll say good morning. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning. Share Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, Naftali and Chavi Tilson from Eretz Yisrael, with appreciation to Rabbi Naftali's Chaver Benjamin Wolf introducing to the Daf. May Hashem bless us to finish the Daf Yomi cycle together and celebrate with the Sim together in Eretz Yisrael. To thank Baruch Meir and Rina Dubin, our Talmud Torah sponsors for Sivan. May Hashem continue to protect our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. And may all of our children remain safe and completed the year of learning with deep connection to the land and to Hashem's Torah. Amen. To thank our Week of Learning sponsor, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for refuah shlema for her grandson, Kobe Rothberg, Yaakov Zev Ben Tzivya Devora, and their Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Leon and Sarah Sassoon, for a refuah shlema for David Ben Bahat. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, Kol Cholei Yisrael will have an enduring and complete refuah. And also with that, let us begin. So we have a really very interesting sugya to do today, really fascinating Gemara. Today's daf is Nun Beis, and we are picking up Emir Hashem on Nun Aleph Amud Beis, 51b. 51b. Seconds. Good. 51b. And so we'll say, so we remember we left off in yesterday's daf. We left off. Let's actually pick up. Let's pick up with the Tanur Rabbanan just to keep things a little bit easier. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 lines off from the bottom. So let's remember again, the Mishnah actually just told us that the Kohen Gadol enters into the Kodesh and he walks to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He's holding the machta, he's holding the fire pan, right, the shovel in his right hand, the kaf in his left hand, and he walks towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's all the Mishnah says. The Brisa then made this conversation exceptionally exciting by talking about the route that the Kohen Gadol took inside of the Kodesh to get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and ultimately, again, highlighting the fact that there is a three-way machlokes as to how the Kohen Gadol walked. So again, let's take a look at that. Tanur Rabbanan, so we read this yesterday, but let's just begin again here. I think it'll make things a little bit clearer, Mir Hashem, for the daf. So the Gemara says, Tanur Rabbanan, Ben HaMizbeach L'Menorah HaYimahalek Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So what Rabbi Yehuda holds, that halacha l'maisa, the Kohen would walk between the menorah or between the Mizbeach and the menorah, which I remember again, as I showed you yesterday. So the Kohen Gadol would enter into the Mikdash, remember, and he would enter in between the Mizbeach and the menorah. So essentially, remember again, the Mizbeach is dead center in the Kodesh. He would go in between the Mizbeach and the menorah, which means he would enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the southern side. Right, remember again, just to get our directions, right? So we've got east, west, north, south. So ultimately, he would enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the southern side. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer ben Shulchan Mizbeach. Rabbi Meir says no, he would come in between the Shulchan and the Mizbeach. So I'll say opposite side. Remember, Shulchan is over here. So he would come in on the northern side of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Yesh Omrim, others say ben Shulchan lekosel. Third opinion said he would essentially the third opinion agrees with Rabbi Meir that he would come in on the northern side, but the third opinion, the Yesh Omrim, says he didn't go in between the Shulchan and the Mizbeach. Instead, he went in between the Shulchan and the wall. So literally, again, he hugged the northern wall, entering into the Kodesh HaKadoshim like that. So says the Gemara, Man Yesh Omrim, who is this Yesh Omrim? To which the Gemara says, Amrav Chisda, Rabbi Yossi, the Yesh Omrim, it's Rabbi Yossi, the Amar Pischa B'Tzafon Kai. Because Rabbi say, what's driving this entire machlokes is as follows. Almost everyone is agreeing, that in the second Beis HaMikdash, which is what we're discussing over here, there was a double curtain. Remember, this goes back to yesterday's daf. There was a double curtain. Why? Because wall, but why the double curtain? Because we weren't sure what to do with the Amma, right? We weren't sure what to do with the Amma, so the double curtain demarcates the space and ultimately, again, goes ahead. We weren't sure as a Kodesh Kodashim, demarcates the space. The machlokes, I will say, is as follows. We're going to see that the outer curtain and the inner curtain both were pinned up. They weren't just left, they were actually pinned up with a golden clasp to keep it open to allow access. Because remember, again, the Kohen Gadol has his hands full, so he can't move the curtain, right? So it's pinned up. The machlokes is which corner is pinned up. Was it the southern corner that was pinned up, or was it the northern corner? And obviously, whatever corner is pinned up on the outer curtain, the opposite corner is pinned up in the inner curtain, because we're going to discuss the coin would go in, wrap around, and come out. We'll see this in the next Mishnah. So that's what's driving this machlokes. So I understand Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda holds that he's entering in on the southern side, and therefore it's the southern side, right between the menorah, between the mizbeach and the menorah. So he's entering in on the south. I understand Rabbi Meir, he's entering in on the north. The Yesh Omrim is interesting because the Yesh Omrim agrees that he's entering in on the north, but as opposed to Rabbi Meir, who says that he's entering between the mizbeach and the shulchan, the Yesh Omrim says that he's going between the shulchan and the kosel and the wall. So the Gemara says, who is this? Who is it? Amar Rav Chisda, Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Yossi. Da Amar Pischa B'Tzafan Kai. Rabbi Yossi held that the opening to the curtain of the Kodesh HaKadoshim was on the northern side. Okay. Rabbi Huda Amar Lacha Pischa B'Daram Kari. Rabbi Huda would disagree. Rabbi Huda would hold that the opening to the curtain was on the southern side. Fine, all makes sense so far. Shabbos says, so let's analyze this. What about the Yesh Omrim? Rabbi Meir. So now we've identified that the Yesh Omrim is Rabbi Meir. Remember again, the Yesh Omrim is the third opinion that says that the Kohen Gadol would walk in between the wall and the Shulchan. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yossi, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Rabbi Yossi, sorry, Rabbi Yossi is Yesh Omrim. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir holds that you go between the Mizbeach and the Shulchan. Rabbi Meir commands Svirale. Who does Rabbi Meir hold like? Ik Rabbi Huda Svirale. If he holds like Rabbi Huda, Neil Rabbi Huda, then go on like Rabbi Huda on the southern side. Ik Rabbi Yossi Svirale, Neil Rabbi Yossi. And if he holds like Rabbi Yossi, then ultimately again go like Rabbi Yossi. Go like Rabbi Yossi, who is the Yesh Omrim, who holds that you go between the Shulchan and the wall. To which the Gemara says, no, the Olim Rabbi Yossi Svirale. Ultimately again, Rabbi Meir holds like Rabbi Yossi. Right? They're both agreeing that you enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the northern side. So why does Rabbi Meir hold that halacha l'maisa, you go between the Mizbeach and the Shulchan? Why not hold like Rabbi Yossi that you go between the Shulchan and the Kosel? Listen to this Svirle. So the Gemara says, Va'amar lecha, Shulchanos tzafan daram munachin, umefas kalei Shulchan v'lo misayale. I will say this is fascinating. Apparently, although we're going to dismiss this in just a moment, there was a machlokes as to how the shulchan was situated. Now, by the way, if you notice, remember, there's Shlomo HaMelech, right when Shlomo HaMelech builds the Beis HaMikdash, Shlomo HaMelech built a lot of additional kelim. So, for example, in the Bayis Rishon there are actually 12 shulchanos. So interestingly enough, Rabbi Meir holds like this: we were assuming that the shulchan is arranged east to west. Rabbi Meir holds that the shulchan was arranged north to south, and ultimately, again, was up against the wall. So because of that, Rabbi Meir holds you can't get between the wall and the shulchan, because the shulchan is against the wall, and it goes east to west. So the only way to go ahead and get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim is how? Between the Mizbeach and the shulchan. Masha'en Kein, apparently Rabbi Yossi holds that the shulchanos were not arranged like that. They were arranged east to west. I'm sorry, right? I don't know if I said this correctly. Rabbi Meir would hold that the shulchanos were arranged north to south. North to south. Therefore, they blocked the way. The only way, therefore, to get around is to walk around them. Whereas Rabbi Meir would hold that halacha l'maisa, they were arranged east to west. So therefore, again, the Gemara accounts, that's why Rabbi Meir would hold that halacha l'maisa, you have to go between the shulchan and the mizbeach. V'bay sema. The other possibility is no. Everyone agrees that the shulchanos are arranged li'olam mizrach u'marav munachin. Everyone agrees that the shulchanos were arranged east to west, not north to south. So why does Rabbi Meir hold that you have to go between the mizbeach and the shulchan? Why not hold like Rabbi Yossi and go between the shulchan and the wall? Both say, think about this. Going between the shulchan and the wall is the easiest thing. Why? Straight. It's straight. Straight path is always right. The derech hayashar is always the easiest one. So why not just go ahead and take a straight path against the northern wall? Listen to this. So the Gemara says, "Umishum shchina lav orech ara lemeil lahedja," top of Nun Beis. Because of us, Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that it's not covered to the shchina to walk directly into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. In other words, when you approach the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you approach with reverence and trepidation. And how does that reverence and trepidation manifest itself? by kind of taking a more circuitous route. So to walk kind of just straight in shows a certain lack of koved rosh. Therefore, again, ultimately, whereas Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Yossi that the entrance is on the north, Rabbi Meir will say take a more circuitous route in between the Mizbech and the Shulchan. Take a look at the top Rashi. Rashi says, Leilech as Eitzel HaKosel HaTzvoni Kol Orech HaHeichal V'chol Shah Einov Nizonos Mi Beis Kodshe HaKadoshim Derech HaPrifa Shekenegdo. You see what's interesting over here is that what Rabbi Meir was concerned about is, remember, the curtain is pinned open, which means if you're hugging that northern wall and walking straight, pretty much you're looking into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. I mean, you're not really looking into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Why not? Why not? Because the second curtain is there. But Lamaisa, you're gazing into the area of the Kodesh HaKadoshim for a prolonged amount of time. Rabbi Meir sees that as a lack of kavod to the makom, and therefore feels it is better to kind of come at an angle. That way you're really only looking into the Kodesh HaKadoshim when you actually hit the entrance of the paroches of the curtain. Rabbi Yossi, so I say, what does Rabbi Yossi do with this? Because remember, Rabbi Yossi holds that halacha l'maisa what? You're hugging the northern wall, right? The Kohen's going across the northern wall, and halacha l'maisa, he's going to enter straight into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Why is he not concerned for this? Amar l'cha, chavivin yisol shlo tzrichen hakasav l'shliach. Rabbi say this is beautiful. Rabbi Yossi holds, literally translated, these words mean that Klal Yisrael is so beloved that they don't even require shaliach. They don't require an agent to supplicate on their behalf to the Ribono Shel Olam. So what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. This is beautiful. Rabbi Yossi Amar L'cha Chavivin Yisrael Shelo Tzricha Nakasav L'Shliach Ela Kol Echad Ve'echad Mispala Al Atzmo. See, Rabbi say, I don't need anyone to intervene on my behalf to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because each of us has the ability to daven for ourselves. Shneimar Asher Yedun Ish Nega Livavo Uparas Kapov El Habayis Hazeh. Hilchach. So we'll say, Hilchach. Chaviv hu shluchan likanis lepumbi. So we'll say, so listen to this. Rabbi Yossi says, a nation that is so holy that we don't need someone to advocate on our behalf. And I will say this is so incredibly important. The most incredible thing about being a Jew and about the nature of our relationship with Hashem is that we don't need intermediaries. I don't need someone to daven for me. Again, it helps if someone, of course, always wonderful if other people daven. But Lamaisa, I don't need someone to daven for me. I have a direct connection to the Ribono Shel Olam. I don't need someone to ask God for anything on my behalf. I have the ability to go ahead and advocate for myself. The Moshe finds the Tzaddik Livracha writes that people often misunderstand when they go to daven at Kivrei Tzadikim, at the graves of righteous people. He says people erroneously think that they're davening to tzaddikim. He says we don't daven to tzaddikim. We only daven to one person, to the Ribono Shel Olam. So why do you go to kivrei tzaddikim? What am I doing? What am I doing in a kivrei of a tzaddik? I'm singing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm davening to Hashem. I'm saying, Hashem, I need A, B, C, D, and E. And if I don't have the requisite merits for you to grant my request, I'm asking you to invoke the merit of the tzaddik. I'm here by the tzaddik. Bring the merit of the tzaddik to bear upon my request. I'm not davening to the tzaddik. I'm not even asking the tzaddik for help. This is so incredibly important because people often think that they're inviting intermediaries to go ahead and advocate on their behalf. I don't need anyone to advocate for me. I can advocate for myself. Sometimes what I'm missing is money in the bank, right? Sometimes I'm missing credit, right? I'm missing divine credit. I'm missing what I need in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to grant my request. So then the beautiful part about being part of the collective is I could tap into the zechuyos of others, but I never davened to myself. In fact, Reb Chaim Volozhiner was very against the section in Slichos. So it's already back to the Gra of Machnise Rachamim. Machnise Rachamim, we say Machnise Rachamim, Machnisu Trinasenu. We say that we're speaking to the Malachim, right? The Malachim bring in our tefillos, and you had sages throughout the ages who were very much against this paragraph because they felt that it's theologically antithetical to what we believe. I don't need anyone to bring in my tefillos. I don't need anyone to advocate for me on high. I can advocate for myself. What I sometimes need are just more zechuyos. So Rabbi Yossi holds like this. He says so beautifully that a nation, now I will say, it's going to sound a little bit counterintuitive for just a moment. Because remember, what is the Kohen Gadol doing on Yom Kippur? Right? I know David Flum was bothered by this. I saw it on your face. Right? So I'll say, so what? So right, the Kohen Gadol is our representative. So remember, I want to make a distinction over here between tefillah and avoda. right? Remember again, not everyone could do avoda. Only Kohanim could do avoda, right? And at the end of the day, on Yom Kippur, only the Kohen Gadol could do the avoda amongst the Kohanim. So there's a difference, right? But what Rabbi Yossi is saying is like this: a nation who has the ability to petition and to dialogue with God at any time in any place is a nation that is beloved. In other words, we'll say, what does it mean to be a member of Klal Yisrael? It means unfettered access to the Ribbono Shel Olam all the time. All the time. Whenever I want a connection, I have that. So Rabbi Yossi says, the shliach of such a people could walk right into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He doesn't have to take a circuitous route. A nation who is so beloved and so connected and has this constant, unrestricted access to the Ribbono Shel Olam, that shaliach, that agent, that emissary of the people, could walk right into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and therefore Rabbi Yossi allows him to hug the northern wall and to walk straight in. Incredible. Rabbi Huda, Nami Neil Bemenor Lakos. That's what the Gemara asked the opposite. What about Rabbi Huda? Remember, according to Rabbi Huda, the Kohen Gadol is entering in on the southern side. Now, according to Rabbi Huda, he said the Kohen Gadol is entering in between the menorah and the mizbeach. So why not, according to Rabbi Huda, why don't you let the Kohen Gadol enter how? Between the menorah and the wall. In other words, just take a straight, everyone says it's always easy, just take a straight shot in. So why not just go ahead, walk straight into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the northern side, to which the Gemara says, listen to this, Mishachri Maneh. Well, see, here's the problem. You know, the wall behind the menorah ultimately, again, accumulated soot as a result of the menorah burning. So what was the concern? What is the Kohen Gadol wearing on Yom Kippur? Big day Lavan. If you make him go in between the menorah and the wall, he'll get his clothing dirty. I'll say, isn't it incredible? We're talking about such beautiful esoteric ideas. A shliach of Am Yisrael walking straight in, and now the Gemara is like, he can't get his clothing dirty. Can't go between the menorah and the wall because get his clothing dirty. I'll say incredible. But I'll say what I will point out is as follows. So this is really, if you think about this, I find these kind of things to be mamish incredibly riveting. Because first of all, when you learn them, you're literally walking in the footsteps of the Kohen Gadol. Which way? Because remember, the Mishnah is totally nondescript with this. All the Mishnah says is what? He enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Mishnah does not tell me anything. The Mishnah also doesn't tell me which way he's going. Three-way machlokes, right? Is he going to the north, like Rabbi Yehuda, in between the Mizbeach and the Menorah? Is he going on the south, like Rabbi Meir, in between the Mizbeach and the Shulchan? Or is he going again, just the opposite. Is he going in the south, according to Rabbi Meir, between the Mizbeach and the Menorah? Is he going in the north, according to, I keep quoting the wrong opinions all the time. Good. Is he going in the south according to Rabbi Yehuda, between the Mizbeach and the Menorah? Is he going in the north according to Rabbi Meir, between the Mizbeach and the Shulchan? Or is he going in the north, really between the wall and the Shulchan according to Rabbi Yossi? So two opinions in the north, one opinion in the south. But I'll point out something fascinating to you, which is that the Rambam in Perek Dalet Halacha Aleph. Well, actually, we'll have to look at this Rambam at some point in time together, because the Rambam actually kind of goes through all of these Mishnayos as a digest and tells you the exact avoda of the day. Because also the Mishnayos, even though the Mishnayos feel like they're going in sequential order, they're not. We're going to see there's other things that are happening. For example, we went from the shechita of the par to taking into the ketores, and there's actually a whole bunch of avoda that happens in between that. We'll fill in the blanks afterwards. But what I will point out to you is something fascinating, that in Perek Dalet Halacha Aleph, when the Rambam speaks about the Kohen Gadol's entry into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Rambam says nothing about this. So the Rambam makes no mention about the direction that the Kohen Gadol goes in. Now, that being said, the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Beis HaBechira that in the second Beis HaMikdash there was a double curtain, and the curtain was pinned up on if you're looking at the Kodesh HaKadoshim, on the left-hand side, which is the southern side, like Rabbi Huda. So the Rambam in Hilchos Yom Kippurim, interesting, does not mention anything, but in Hilchos Beis HaBechira clearly indicates, and you could even see that, by the way, that it's even, you could see it even on the picture of the Beis HaMikdash. You could see that the outer curtain is pinned up on the bottom, right? Which is, if you're looking at the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the left-hand side, which is the southern side. But again, I'll just mention the Rambam in Hilchos Yom Kippurim makes no mention about this. Interesting. All right, in any event, the Gemara says as follows. I'm Rab Nosson. I'm a Traxin, lo echriba chachamim ikilifnim ikilachotz. So we'll say, interesting statement now. Rabbi Nosson says, the Amatraxin. What's the Amatraxin? We spoke about this yesterday. What is the Amatraxin? That's the 1 amma thickness that the wall occupied in the first Beis HaMikdash. Remember again, as we spoke about yesterday, the first Beis HaMikdash, everyone agrees, had a wall right in between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and there was an entranceway in that wall which had a curtain in front of it. The second Beis HaMikdash, they couldn't build that wall. Why not? Why not? Ceiling heights changed too dramatically. So you cannot build a wall that high. In order to build a wall that high, it would have to be much thicker. But you cannot change the dimensions, as we'll discuss. So both I said the Amatraxin, remember, going back to yesterday's daf, the challenge with the Amatraxin is, what did that Amma space represent? Did that Amma space belong to the Kodesh, or did it belong to the Kodesh HaKadoshim? So the Gemara says, Maskef Ravina, my taima. Now, what's the reason there's such confusion about the Amatraxin? So the Gemara says, Imishum, I'm sorry, my time, Imishum Dichsiv, Va'abayis Sharbana Shlomo LaHashem, Shishim Amma Arko. So also listen to this. We're going to get now a little bit into the dimensions of the Beis HaMikdash. Those I sent out on the chat. It's actually, I took it from the art scroll because I found that was the clearest image on this. There's one in the back of my Gemara also, but the art scroll was a little bit easier only because it has the numbers on it as well. So we'll see. You could reference that picture. We're gonna actually go through that picture together in just a moment. But if you want to start looking at it, you can. You can see the pasuk inside. Va'abayis asher bana shlomo LaHashem shishim ama arkbo. So we'll say the home that Shlomo Melech built for HaKadosh Baruch Hu was 60 amos in length. Now, both says, you could see already that 60 amos represents the length of the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right? Remember again, you can see it over here, 40 amos of the Heichal and ultimately 20 amos of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Rachbo, so the Gemara says, Esrim Rachbo was 20 amos in width, Ushloshim Amma Komaso, and 30 amos in height. So both says, also just to give you ideas, remember an amma is approximately 1.5 feet. Uksiv, and his pasuk says, "Va'arbaim ba'ama haya habayis hu ha'heichal lifnei uksiv lifnei had." So fine. Then it says, the next part of the pasuk says, and the bayis, what we call the heichal or the kodesh, was 40 amos in length. So again, you could see all of this on the image over here. Uksiv lifnei had devir esrim ama orech ve'esrim ama rochav ve'esrim ama komaso. And I will say again. And then you could see, the pasuk says, Lifnei Adavir, and in front of the partition, there was 20 amos, or really by the partition, or in front of the partition, there was Esrim Aman Orech, 20 amos of length. So we'll say this is now referring to the dimensions of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right? So the Holy of Holies had 20 amos of length, the Esrim Ama Rochav, and 20 amos of width, the Esrim Ama Komoso, and 20 amos of height. So the Gemara says, V'lo yadinan, Amatraxin imehani mehani esim v'imehani arbaim. So we'll say, so maybe the machlokes is like this. Here's what I know. The total length of the Beis HaMikdash, we'll say, excluding the ulam. Remember again, in the image I sent you, the ulam is the big rectangular entranceway over here. We're not including the ulam over here. But when you look at the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you have 60 amos of length. 40 amos of that. 40 amos of that is the Kodesh. 20 amos of that is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Good. So the Gemara says maybe the machlokes is the Amatraxin, the 1 amma of width, which the wall occupied in the first Beis HaMikdash and the curtain occupied in the second Beis HaMikdash. Maybe you're just not sure. Does that 1 amma belong to the 40 or does it belong to the 20? Well, the Gemara says, I'll give you another possibility. V'dilma lo mehani esrim v'lo mehani arboim. Maybe it doesn't belong to either. And I will say maybe when the Navi goes ahead and recounts the dimensions are independent of the Amatraxin. In other words, there was 40 amos of, well, let's see, the v'chalola kachashiv, koslim lo kachashiv. Maybe in general, when the Navi gives us the dimensions of the Beis HaMikdash, the dimensions are talking about interior usable space, not talking about wall widths. So therefore, when it says that the Beis HaMikdash was 40 amos, that's 40 amos of interior space, usable space. 20 amos of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, 20 amos of interior Kodesh HaKadoshim space. But in fact, the Beis HaMikdash structure itself was much larger because you have wall widths, which are not included at all. So the Gemara says, "V'chalal lo kosim lo kachashiv." Teida. The Gemara says, by the way, this is unequivocally correct, and I'll show you why it's unequivocally correct. We'll say, I'll show you. This is incredible. We're going to see now all the dimensions, and then Allah Lamaisa. When the Navi tells me that effectively the Beis Hamikdash was 100 amos in length, that is interior usable space. That does not include the amatraxin, but we're going to see the amatraxin is the least of it. It doesn't include any wall widths in that number. Wall width, is that the right term? Yeah, wall width. Good. So the Gemara says, Teida, d'chol heicha d'kachashiv koslim, chashiv le'ele didei. Well, I'll tell you this, the Gemara says, I'll tell you the proof. The proof is that whenever the Navi talks about wall width, right, ultimately again, it reckons it separately and independently. We'll say, here we go, this nan. So we'll say here, this Mishnah is going to go through this image that we have. So again, you have it right in front of you now. So the Gemara says, Teida, this nan, ha'hecha mea ama al mea, birum mea. So we'll say the heichal itself was 100 amos by 100 amos. The Gemara says, kosel, here we go, kosel ulam chamesh. So we'll say, so now look what we're doing. If you look at that image that I sent you, so what we're starting is, just so you understand, we're starting from the east and we're going to work our way west. Right? We'll say, the Beis Hamikdash, I sent it out on WhatsApp. You could check your messages for this, right? Just for this. Right? So the Gemara says, so the image that we've been using, the large Beis Hamikdash image, is actually not going to be helpful for this discussion. Just look at the one. If you have the Art Scroll Gemara, I took this right out of the Art Scroll. So we'll say, here we go, working from east to west. So kolsa ulam chamesh. So the thickness of the ulam, remember again, the ulam is the antechamber. It's the entranceway. It's like the corridor into the Beis Hamikdash. So the thickness, kolsa ulam chamesh. Va'ulam achat esrei, right? So we have the thickness of the wall is 5, right? 5 amos in width. The width of the ulam is 11 amos. So right, ulam itself is 11 amos. Ha'heichal sheish, kosel ha'heichal sheish. But then you have a wall of the heichal. Remember again, those dark areas are walls. You have a wall of the heichal which is 6 amos. Va'arko arba'im amo. Then you have the length ultimately of the heichal, which is 40 amos. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. So ulam achat esrei kol sel heichal sheish arko arba'im amo va'amatraxin. Then I both say you have the amatraxin, right? Remember again. So the amatraxin. Now I both say, if you notice on this, it's in there, right? Those two lines. Those are supposed to represent the curtain in between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and you have 1 amma of space in between that area, the amatraxin, the chav amma base Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then 20 amos of length of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now we'll say, now we're behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Kosel ha'heichal sheish, then you have 6 amos of wall width in the wall behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the hatah. So we'll say, we're going to discuss the ta, was a compartment, or really a room behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That was sheish, another 6 amos, and ultimately again v'kosel hata chamesh, and then the wall behind the ta, which is really the exterior wall of the Beis Hamikdash, another 5 amos. So I will say, if you add that all up, ultimately again you get 100 amos. You get 100 amos. So I will say, now why are we quoting this? We're quoting this over here because to show you that wall widths are reckoned separately than interior widths. So therefore, again, beforehand, when the Navi tells us that halacha l'maisa, the Kodesh was 40 amos in length, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim was 20 amos in length, at the end of the day, that's interior usable space, not counting the wall width. Now, I will say, so remember again, why are we having this discussion, right? How do we get it? Besides the fact that it's just fascinating, but why are we having this discussion? Because we're fixated on this amatraxin, right? We're fixated on this 1 amma of space. The wall took up that 1 amma of space in the first Beis Hamikdash. The curtain took up that space. Ultimately, again, in the second Beis Hamikdash, and what? Sorry. And at the end of the day, the Gemara says, and at the end of the day, the Gemara explains that we're just not sure what to do with the amatraxin, right? What should we do with it? To which the Gemara said, maybe we're just not sure. Does the amatraxin ultimately count as part of the Kodesh or part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? To which the Gemara says, well, maybe the answer is neither, right? Maybe the answer is neither, because at the end of the day, maybe the amatraxin is simply reckoned on its own, independent of anything else. And again, that assertion is clearly supported by the idea that halacha l'maisa, when the Gemara talks about the interior measurements, it counts the interior usable spaces by themselves and wall widths by themselves as well. To which the Gemara says, you're right. We're not really worried about if the amatraxin, what are we worried about? We're not worried about the amatraxin from a dimensional perspective. What are we worried about? From a kedusha perspective, a sanctity perspective. Rather, the Gemara says, Ella, kedusha se ikilifnim, ikilachotz. Rather, again, I will say what we are worried about is the kedusha, ultimately, again, is the kedusha of the amatraxin like the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or is it like the Kodesh? That's the fundamental question. So we'll say, therefore, the pasuk says there was a chamber within the bayis on the inside mipnima. Heichen, they prepared it to put the aron there. And ibayluhu heichi kamakra. So we'll say, how do you read that pasuk? Udevir basoch habayis. Do we say that there was a chamber inside of? Or really, I should say, Devir is really a divider. There was a divider in the bayis. We say Devir b'soch habayis mipnima heichen l'sitan sham. So we'll say there are two ways you could read the pasuk. You could read there was a divider put inside of the Beis Hamikdash, and ultimately, again, from that divider in, from the other side of the divider inside was the Kodesh HaKadoshim, meaning that the divider itself is not part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. O dilma hachli kamar, or maybe this is what it means to say. Udevir b'soch habayis mipnima. Or maybe what it means to say, both say, is that what? From the divider in is considered to be the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So we'll say, see what's happening over here? Do we count the divider as part of the Kodesh, or is the divider not part? I'm sorry, I should read the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Is the divider part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or is the divider not part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? So we'll say, is this really a suffix? And both remember again, it's all based, the Gemara is bothered by how do you read the pasuk. It says, Udevir b'soch habayis mipnima heichin l'sitein sham es arbris Hashem. Literally again, from the divider inside of the bayis, from the inside was prepared to place the aron there. So do we say, from the divider inside is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the divider is the curtain, ultimately again, or is the wall, is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or no, there's a divider, and from the area after the divider and on is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the Gemara said, was this really a suffix about how to read the pasuk? Vatanya, we learned, Isi ben Yehuda Omer, this is fascinating. Isi ben Yehuda says, Chamesh mikraos b'Torah, ein lahen hechreya. There are 5 psukim in the Torah that I will say ultimately again are ambiguous, and it's not clear how to read them. Right? What's ambiguous about them? So the Gemara says, in other words, they could be read in different ways. Amud Beis, seis. So we'll say, so remember, this is the pasuk by Cain. Haloim seitiv seis. So we'll say there are 2 ways you could read this pasuk. You could go ahead and read it. Haloim seitiv seis. If you go ahead, Kakash Baruch says to Cain, if you improve yourself, right? If you improve yourself, you will lift yourself up. Or the pasuk can be read. If you look at the pasuk, you can see it over here. If you quote it in the Torah, or if you have the psukim listed on the side, the pasuk is Elohim Seitiv Seis. So again, it can be read. If you improve yourself, you'll lift yourself up. Or Haloim Seitiv Seis Ve'im Lo Seitiv. Ultimately, if you look at Rashi, he says O Seis Im Lo Seitiv Alashon Asiyas Avon. So Seis can be read as if you improve yourself, you can lift yourself up. Or it could be, if you don't improve yourself, you'll continue to carry your sin. So we're not sure, does se'es, where do we put the comma? Does se'es go, does se'es go with the first part of the pasuk or the second part of the pasuk? Mishu kadim, so I'll say, so remember again, Mishu kadim is by the menorah. So the pasuk that the Gemara is talking about over here, Mishu kadim means engraved with almonds, right? That's what it means. So the Gemara says, if you look at that pasuk of Mishu kadim, so it says, Ubemenorah arba'a gevim Mishu kadim kaftra pracheha. Does mishukadim engraved with almonds go on the gevim, the cups of the menorah, or does it go on the kaftram, the knobs of the menorah? What was engraved with almonds? Okay, machar Rashi says over here, Sehi lachem ba'amalek machar. So we'll say the pasuk Gemara says over here, Moshe says to Yoshua, Bechar lanu anashim, v'tsehi lachem ba'amalek machar ani anochi nitzav arosh hagiva. So we'll say, is Moshe telling Yoshua, go out to war with Amalek tomorrow? Or is he telling, go out to war with Amalek today, and tomorrow, machar anochi nitzav aroshar, and tomorrow I'll be on the mountain. So the Gemara says, Arur, Rashi says over here, Ubir tzanam ikru shar. This is in Parshas Vayechi. Besodam al tavel nafshi bekalam al techad kvodi ki ba'apam hargu ish. Ubir tzanam ikru shar. Arur apam kiyaz. So we'll say again, Yaakov Avinu talking to Shimon and Levi. So do we say Ubir tzanam ikru shar arur? They uprooted a cursed ox, which is a reference to Shechem, or is it arur apam? Their anger is cursed. Vikam. If you look at Rashi, Rashi's over here, Vikam. This again is by Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah says, "Vayomer Shema Moshe, Hin chashochi b'ma'osecha, Vikam ha'amazeh v'zachar elikim." Chashbahu tells Moshe, "You're going to die. You're going to die." And then what? And then ultimately, again, there was Vikam, you'll get up, or Vikam ha'amazeh, the nation will get up. So is Chashbahu telling Moshe, "You're going to die, Vikam, but you'll come back to life," which is a reference, says Rashi, to Tchias HaMesim. Or is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying to Moshe, you're going to die, and when you die, the nation is going to rebel. So we'll say it's really quite fascinating how you have these 5 different Seis, Mishukadim, Machar, Arur, and Kam. These are the 5 situations in the Torah where we're not sure whether or not the word goes with the previous phrase or with the next phrase. And obviously, again, depending on where you place the word, fundamentally goes ahead and changes the meaning. So the Gemara says, V'atanya, we learned, V'atanya, hu Yosef ish Hutzal, hu Yosef habavli, hu Isi ben Yehuda, hu Isi ben Gur Aryeh, hu Isi ben Gamliel, hu Isi ben Mahalalel, Umashmo. So we'll say all these people are the same people. But what was his real name? Umashmo Isi ben Akiva Shmo. Isi Akiva. So we'll say, so what the Gemara is asking is as follows. The Gemara is making it sound over here that Yosef ish Hutzal, Yosef ish Hutzal was not sure how to read the pasuk that the Gemara quoted from Malachim Aleph, right? And really, the ambiguity is based on this phrase. Udevir besoch habayis mipnima. Is the devir, is the divider, is the curtain part of the Kodesh or part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? So the Gemara says, really? Did Isi ish Hutzal, who's Isi ben Akiva, did he have a doubt about how to read this pasuk? After all, Isi ben Akiva said there are only 5 words in the Torah that we're not sure where to attribute them, to the beginning of the pasuk or the end of the pasuk. Seis mishukadim machar aravikam, and devir mipnima is not in that list. So why would Isi have doubt about how to read that pasuk? To which the Gemara says, no. B'daraisa leka b'nedevi ika. No, what Isi ben Akiva meant is, in the Torah, in the Chumash, there are 5 situations where we're unsure about where to place the comma. But in the Nevi'im, there are certainly more examples of this. And the pasuk that we're quoting from Malachim is obviously from Navi, and they had a doubt about that pasuk. And we'll say it makes sense. How do you read the pasuk? Does the pasuk mean from the interior of the curtain and on is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and therefore telling us that the curtain itself, or the area of the curtain, the Amatraxin, is not part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, instead it's part of the Kodesh? Or do they mean to say that halacha l'maisa, the devir itself was mipnima. The devir itself, the curtain itself, the area that the curtain occupied, the Amatraxin was part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim as well. That was an ambiguity as to how to read the pasuk. So the Gemara says, is that true that there are no more than these 5 examples of textual ambiguity about how to read a particular word, a particular phrase? Vayishlach es na'arei b'nei Yisrael, vayalu olos kivosim, vayizbechu zvachim shlomim parim. So the pasuk says over here, quoted from the pasuk in Shmos, they sent the Na'arei b'nei Yisrael, and they offered up olos, and then they offered up vayizbechu zvachim shlomim la'Hashem parim. So we'll say, so what's the ambiguity? So the Gemara says, you see, when the pasuk says they offered up olos, so does that refer to kvasim? Does that refer to sheep? Maybe that's just referring to sheep. O Dilma, or maybe no, the end of the pasuk says that they offered up parim. So we'll say, remember, so the pasuk explicitly says that they offered up zvachim shlomim, ultimately again as parim. But when it says olos, does olos refer to kvasim? Did they offer up sheep or did they offer up parim? Which one was it? To which the Gemara says, O dilma idi v'idi parim. So we'll say, you see from here another example of an ambiguity, to which the Gemara says, Rav Chisda mesapkale li'isi ben Yehuda pshitle. So Rav Chisda had a suffix, but apparently Isi ben Yehuda did not have a suffix in this particular situation. Good. So we'll say this brings to a close this particular sugi. So we'll say, so this discussion about the Amatraxin itself is an unresolved machlokas. It's a machlokas. Remember again, it never came up in the first temple era. Why not? Why not? Because a wall sat on the area, right? So it never. But in the second Beis Hamikdash, we're not sure. We're not sure. Is that Amma Kodesh? Is it Kodesh Kadash? We're not sure. So therefore, the way we deal just simply with the ambiguity or the unsureness of it is we place that double curtain there, thereby demarcating that space. So effectively, no one is using it except for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. If it's Kodesh, Kohen Gadol could be there. And even if it's Kodesh HaKadoshim, Kohen Gadol could be there as well on Yom Kippur. So either way, we've taken care of it. But again, it's fascinating to note that in a Beis Hamikdash where everything is so clearly choreographed and scripted and nothing is left to the imagination, right? It's planned to the last Amma. It's amazing that nestled in that beautiful Beis Hamikdash is one Amma of doubt, right? One Amma of ambiguity, which tells us about an incredible Musa, which is that in Yiddishkeit, you never have all of the answers. And it's very important to be able to accept that reality. We always want the answers, right? We always want, it's in our teva to try to understand things, and that's incredible, and to try to answer all of the mysteries of life, and to try to have everything make sense. And I will say, isn't it incredible that in the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in literally, again, a foot and a half away from the holiest place in the earth, we're not sure the status of that makom. Is it Kodesh? Is it Kodesh HaKadoshim? Is it part of the Heichal? Is it part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? We're just not sure. Because living with doubt and living with unanswered questions and living with a little bit of ambiguity is part and parcel of the destiny of the Jew. An incredible yisod. But let's go weiter. So we'll say so just again, our takeaways from this sugya. Our takeaways from the sugya is three-way machlokas about how the Kohen Gadol enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, ultimately again on Yom Kippur. Three machlokas, as you mentioned, the Rambam doesn't really step into that. Although again, we've seen that the Rambam passes in Hilchos Beis HaBechira that the curtain was pinned up on the left side when you're facing Kodesh HaKadoshim, the left side, which is the southern side of the curtain. We also saw that in general when the Beis Hamikdash speaks about dimensions, right? Dimensions that are mentioned are referring to what? Internal usable space. But wall widths are always reckoned separately and independently, and we end off with the machlokas about the fundamental nature and identity of the Amatraxin. Beautiful. Says the Mishnah. We'll say, here we go. So we'll say we're continuing, literally we'll say it's almost as if we have the great schus to walk side by side with the Kohen Gadol. So what happens? So the Kohen Gadol, I'm sorry, wrong Mishnah. Sorry, I turned back, I'm sorry. Okay, I said, wow, that looked familiar. Okay, good. We'll say, here we go, thank you. So we'll say, see here the Mishnah says it explicitly, right? So the outer curtain was pinned up on the southern side. So we'll say, remember again, if you're looking at the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's the left. But the inner curtain was pinned up on the northern side, which was the right side. So let's say, so obviously the Kohen Gadol is going in and walking around. So again, outer curtain pinned up on the southern side, which is the left. Inner curtain pinned up on the northern side, which is the right. Mahalich, the Gemara says, Mahalich beinein ad shemagia letzafon. So what happens? The Kohen Gadol would enter in by the outer curtain on the left side, the southern side. He would walk from south to north, and he would enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim by the second curtain on the northern wall, right by the northern side. Higilat Safan, so we'll say once he enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the northern side, Holfech Panav L'darom. But say he would then turn and face the south. So you see what's happening? He enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim by the outer curtain on the southern side, on the left. He then makes a right, walks towards the north. He then goes ahead and what? He then goes ahead and enters into the curtain on the northern side, goes ahead and now turns left and starts walking south. The Gemara says, and I will say, when now at this point the Kohen Gadol is in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He is now in the Holy of Holies. So now, as he's walking in the Holy of Holies, he's walking towards the south, which means that the paroches is on his left. Right? The paroches is on his left. So the Gemara says, "V'hol mehalech lismolo ima paroches ad shumagia la'aron." And now he keeps walking until he gets mamish to the aron. Hegia la'aron. When he gets to the aron, no sin as hamachta ben shtei habadim. He goes in and he places the fire pan, right, which was the shovel with the coals on it between the poles. I also remember again, the poles of the aron were pointed east to west. The poles extended to the curtain, towards the curtain. So I also remember again, so the Kohen Gadol now is in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He's facing south, right? He gets in, he makes a left, he's walking towards the south. He gets to the poles of the aron and he places the fire pan down on the poles, in between the poles. He then, Rabosai, goes ahead and pours or piles the ketores on the coals. Remember again, as I mentioned, Rabosai, remember what's missing over here. We may mention it before. What's missing over here is the process by which he transfers the contents of the ladle into his hands. Remember again, we pass in chofein achar chofein, that there's a second chafina that's done. He empties the contents of the ladle into his hands. Then he pours the ketores onto the mizbeach. And at this point, the entire Kodesh HaKadoshim becomes filled with smoke. Yatsa, so what's at that point in time, he leaves the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Yatsa, uba lo b'derech beis knisaso. And he comes back out the same way he came in, or just the opposite. So, right, he's going to go out on the northern side, right, by the north, because again, it's the northern side of the inner curtain that's pinned up. He's going to go up on the northern side, make his way through. So he's going to go in. He's going to walk now towards the south and come out on the southern side. So the Gemara says, "Umispalel tefila kitzara bebeis hachitzon," and he would daven a short prayer by the outer chamber. So Rashi points out the Beis HaChitzon is the Heichal. So he wouldn't daven. See, you would, from the Mishnah, it almost sounds like he's davening this tefillah in the corridor, in the curtain corridor. That's not where he's davening. He comes out of the curtain corridor, comes into the Beis HaMikdash itself, the Heichal, and that's where he davens his tefillah kitzara. We'll discuss what that tefillah is. So he would not daven for long, in order not to scare anyone. They will say, now what do you mean scare anyone? So I will say, because they remember again, the concern was when the Kohen Gadol was doing the Ketores Avodah in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, no one was allowed in the Mikdash. No one was allowed in the Mikdash itself. In the Heichal, no one was allowed in. So as such, no one knows the Kohen Gadol is alive until when? Till he walks out of the Mikdash. So obviously, people knew about how long the Ketores service would take. So the Kohen Gadol was careful not to tarry, not to delay. Truth, I take it back. The truth is, they would, we'll see in the Gemara. But he was careful not to tarry. So he would daven, it's interesting, he would daven just a tefillah kitzara, a short tefillah, in order not to go ahead and scare him. And I will say, we'll have to stop, but I'll tell you something amazing. You see from here something dramatically incredible. That, what do you mean? It's Yom Kippur, and the Kohen Gadol is davening on behalf of Klal Yisrael. So people will get a little bit scared. Who cares? We'll see. You see something amazing. You are never allowed to, you can never allow your ruchnius to come at the expense of someone else's feelings, right? Your bein adam l'makam cannot encroach on your bein adam l'chavero. It's an incredible yisod. You'll see yourself, it's Yom Kippur, it's the Kohen Gadol. Let the Kohen Gadol daven for as long as you want. People will be scared, they'll be scared. No. Even the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur must be ever conscious and aware of the feelings of others. So it's true you need to daven, it's true in the coming out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, daven a tefillah kitzara. This way you don't make anyone else know. So I have to stop over here. I'm sorry. So much more to do. But I'm going to pick up with the Gemara Mirat Hashem tomorrow.